You guys, okay. Yeah, Facebook is happening and we are now both live and recorded. So sweet. Is that correct, Sarah? Both are happening. Good. Um,
Yeah.
you know what we're here to do? We're here to do a little Bible study and hang out together. So let me pray for us. Thank you, Father. We get the opportunity to be together again and to wrestle with this super cool, but sometimes really complicated book to try and understand. And tonight is complicated. I don't know exactly how I see all of this. So I'm looking forward to this community and how they see it. And maybe we'll learn a little bit more about your word, of course, the Bible, and your word made flesh, Jesus, hopefully throughout all that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Man,
All right, so I got a lot of complaints last week about all that long introduction, so I'm going to skip all of that. Like, people were like, okay, we're out of here after about 8 minutes of listening to introductions. I'm like, gosh, you guys are rude. But whatever. I thought it was nice to introduce new people, but we are glad to see everybody. And we're talking about, oh, I meant to say this. You all are invited. If you haven't seen the invitation on your church bulletin yet, you're all invited. Please join us for our wedding coming up on March 29th. If you've got questions, just write me. You guys all can contact me, I'm sure. But we'd love to have you, Rebecca and I. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're talking about these deities, demons, devils, dragons, death, and any other D words that we can come up with. Any words. Satans, adversaries, destroyers. That's another good one. Cherubim, seraphim, Ophanim, Malachim. Somebody wrote me this week and asked me about Malachim, which is great. We'll talk about them. We get into the New Testament, Angelos, the angels, the Diamonos, the demons, the shades, the jinn, the giants. You name these weird pestilence creatures, these creeping animals that bring death with their, every step. All that stuff's in the Bible, and most of it you can't see. So some of it you can, and you just kind of skip over it, or you just say, oh, that's just something I understand. But it's not. It's not something any of us understand because none of us come from any of these cultures. So we just make up stuff that fits from our culture and we put it back on theirs, and that's unfair. And we don't want to do that to the Bible. So that's why we're here. So today we are talking about the seraphim. Okay, we started it last week. We did a pretty big introduction. Somebody's got like rushing waters. Some mute theirs. Let's see. Who's not muted? Am I the only one hearing the rushing water?
Looks like Susan or
There we go.
Tom or Fran.
They got it. Doesn't matter. Okay, so seraphim, right? And it's back.
Process of elimination is Fran or Tom are the only ones not.
it's
Susan.
not. It is not me.
Sorry, Fran. I'm just saying because you're not muted. Sorry.
All right. Oh, that's a screw. That's gonna be dirty. This just means plural, so you can say seraphs. We talked about that last week. Here's the quick summary of all this. We put these seraphs in this cool angel category. And we do this because maybe a little bit because of the New Testament. The New Testament's going to pull us maybe in that direction. But what's going to happen, and what I want to show you with each one of these things, is that we're going to move from something in the ancient Near East to the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible to the New Testament to what about now? Okay, can everybody read that? Yes. If you're looking carefully, you can anyway. I'll try to write bigger. Okay, so there's going to be an evolution of these things. Even in just the Old Testament in the Hebrew Bible, because seraphim is a Hebrew word, right? There's going to be some kind of a movement even there, and not all the texts are going to give you the same understanding of what a seraphim is. But you're going to see a huge progression as you move forward chronologically, right? They're going to change their mind on what a seraphim is. They're going to think differently about it. They're going to define them differently. Okay, that's just normal. It's what happens in culture. Okay, which makes you kind of think, which is always what we're doing, is this something real or is this something imagined? Or is the way that they describe this thing imagined, but there actually is something in the background that is real, and they're just kind of guessing at what it is, this thing is. All right, so you're going to see this especially with the seraphim, the cherubim, the ophanim, right? But even the demons and angels will they'll look different, not just looks and appearance, but they'll do different things. They'll be in charge of different things as time goes by. Okay, so seraphim, we looked at our main text here was Isaiah chapter 6. You remember that? We started with holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, right? He reigns, blah, blah, blah. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord lofty and exalted, the train of his robe filling the temple. And that's the whole, here am I, send me. And they touched his lips, right, with the coal and burned him and purified him for an act of service. We call this the call of the prophet. Okay, most of the prophetic texts have something about the call to the prophet in there. So this verse, we said, all we know about them is that they're called seraphim, that they cry back and forth, holy, holy, holy. We said that they have, how many wings? Anybody remember that one? 6.
Six.
Good job. Good job. That's all the people. Well done. 6. And when they speak, things shake. Things shake. That's all we know about them there. But there's lots of other times that the word seraph shows up. Okay?
Just
And so we
initials?
started. Roy, you're on. Just
I
FYI.
work on
Hear you.
printing.
We can hear you, Roy. Thank you. And that rushing water. It's got to be Tom, right? Tom, I think you're the rushing water guy.
I don't have any water going.
I just mean it's static or something. But nope, it's gone again.
It's just the
No.
mic to mute it.
It's what's me?
It's just Tom's mic. When it's muted,
Oh,
there's
okay. It's just
feedback.
the microphone. Okay. All right. So we looked at another verse. We'd already gotten here. That's why I'm going really fast on all this. We started talking about Numbers 21. Okay. So you can look at that. We're going to spend a lot of time in the actual Bible. We read this one last week, but I want to read it real quickly. We read it in a couple different translations, I think. So it says this: so the Lord sent venomous snakes among the people. Okay, so Numbers 21, verse 6 through 9. You guys want to join me there? Okay. The Lord sent venomous snakes among the people, and many of the Israelites were bitten and died. All right, so that first word, venomous, is sarah. Okay, so we got this word here. So again, it's sarah. All right. Boy. Okay, now people are muted. Okay, so seraph is the venomous, and then that word snakes is the same snake word you're going to see most of the time in the Bible. Okay, which is nahash or hanashim in this case because it's plural. And so this gives you a little bit of clue here. Hanashim. Okay, plural. This is the word the and the letter S. So the nashim. Okay, the nashes. Okay, that's what these are. Or nahash. I'm sorry, I forgot. Hanashim. Hanash. Okay, so the Lord sent venomous snakes among the people, and many of the Israelites were bitten and died. I'm not just giving you Hebrew for fun. It's going to be relevant throughout this. It's very important for us to see where that word shows up. Then the people came to Moses and said, we've sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Intercede with Yahweh, the Lord, so he will take the snakes away from us. So Moses interceded for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, what do you guys have there? Make a
staff of a serpent.
Okay, a serpent staff. Is that what it says?
Yeah. The gold.
Of gold. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. There's a lot of words in there that are interesting to me. What version do you have, Lori?
It's the NLT, but I just pulled those words out of my brain.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
I was like, wow, I don't remember any of those words showing up, but cool. Okay. All right. So it's
Pushtan.
make a seraph again. Seraph. Make a seraph. That's all it is there, by the way. My version says a fiery serpent. I don't know what yours says. Something close to that? Flaming snake?
Snake.
It just says snake all by itself. Okay, so that's the word seraph there. Okay. There's no other word. There's no word for fire. There's no word for nahash. Isn't going to show up there. Nothing's showing up. It's just the word seraph. And mount it on a pole. When anyone who's bitten it looks at it, he'll live. So Moses made this bronze snake. Now this is this word, nahash again. Did you even see that? Yes. Nahash. And then at the end, this says snake. And at the end, there's an nahashet. This changes this whole word to the word bronze. They're two different words. It's just cool, right? So it's just cool Hebrew. Nahash, nahashet. That's it. So it's a bronze serpent. So you're going to make a bronze serpent. And if they do that, they'll live. So as I said last week, basically, oh yeah, you want to see death in the wilderness? I'll show you death in the wilderness. And so God is like, he's bringing it with these death snakes, these fire snakes, whatever they are. Okay. Now that's the singing angels, creatures from Isaiah 6 are now these agents of wrath, of rage going into, Isaiah 13 calls them agents of rage, going into this place to kill everyone, right? And so thousands of people are going to die because of these seraph. The ones that are singing holy, 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 touching his coals, touching coals, it's the same word. Now that doesn't mean it's the same creature, right? Necessarily, but it is the same word. And so that should be interesting to us. Okay. And we know that the word seraph means to burn or incinerate or cause burning or something like that. So it's the flaming or causing flame. It's shooting flames. Something like that is going on there. All right. So God's executing a lot of people for complaining. Okay. Probably need to talk about that over the whole time together, because it seems like most of the monsters that are going to show up are really kind of doing God's bidding. And most of the time, they're doing some really destructive, horrible things. Right? And we can easily just say, well, God is righteous. That's where we ended it last week, right? God is righteous. So if he says to do something, it must be the right thing to do. And I was like, okay, that's a very fair response. It just feels like me in my modern age is like, I don't know, if my children complain a lot, I'm probably not going to lock them in a room with a bunch of snakes. Right? I mean, I don't care how much they complain. I'm not going to do that. And I don't think I love my kids as much as we say God loves his. But I don't know. It's just, so you have to figure out, you got to reconcile this somehow. We got to deal with this at some point, and maybe at the end of this, we can talk more about that. But I think what we're going to end up with is that whole last session that we did together, right? Like, what does it mean for God to let his people tell the story? He lets his children in their inexhaustive, immature understanding of him tell a story. Maybe this is the kind of story that they're going to tell.
Is it possible that the reference to snake is allegorical to bad people?
So are you talking about in this particular place in Numbers?
Yes.
I mean, anything's possible. Let's play with the idea for a second. Yeah. Because, I mean, using allegory is a great way to get us out of trouble in texts, right? And it's has a long history in theological interpretation of getting us out of trouble. Like, oh boy, we don't like that, so let's just interpret it differently. So that's perfectly fair. Would it work for God to send a whole thousands of people in to destroy them? I mean, we have plenty of examples of that, right? Sending the Assyrians, sending the Babylonians, sending the Persians, sending the Greeks, sending the Romans to do those kinds of things. I mean, that's an interesting interpretation. Anybody want to piggyback on that? Once you get into allegory, you're kind of freed up to do almost anything you want, right? So it gets a little bit dangerous, but the truth is, even in literal interpretation, you can pretty much do whatever you want. I kind of like it. I gotta think about it more, Tom. I haven't thought about it before.
I mostly hear that in reference to politics, but we probably don't want to go there. Bunch
Yeah,
of snakes, you know?
Right. Jesus even says that, right? You brood of vipers. Right. So that would be interesting.
But when it's used in the New Testament in John, it seems to be referring to snake there, doesn't it? As Moses lifted up the serpent in the snake in the wilderness, so too must the Son of Man be lifted up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
I don't know
So-
that that's a human. They're not, there would be I assume a different word used if it meant to be were meant to be a human.
Yeah. All right. So that is definitely an argument for for it not being allegorical, or at least for John not taking it allegorically. John seems to think there was a literal snake, it sounds like to me. But then we'd still have to ask questions. If we're jumping outside of our evangelical box for a minute, we'd still have to ask questions, right? Like, well, is John right? And then we would jump back into our box real quick and say, of course, John's right. Of course, he's always right, right?
If we jump out of the evangelical box, we can look at other cultures like the Greeks, the Asclepius, the rod of Asclepius, who it's
Asclepius, yeah.
yeah, Asclepius. How do you pronounce it?
Yep. I say Asclepius. I don't know. I don't live in that world.
Yeah, Asclepius. That's what I like. But yeah, well, I mean, that's the yeah. It's probably right. But yeah, what about if we're stepping outside of the evangelical box? What about the connotations to, like, are the Greeks stealing that from the Hebrews, or what's going on with that? Because that's, like, I think 8th century BC, where they're using it as a sign for healing. Like snakes were seen as a healing sign.
The Greeks are using that in 8th century BC. Is that when that is?
No. I think the idea of it started in 8th century BC, but the Greeks are like 5th century BC. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. When it becomes a symbol of healing and doctors and stuff like that, you're saying, when it takes on that form.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. They're definitely stealing it from this story or stories like this, I would think. I don't know much more about how it moves. That's a good question.
I just wanted to make sure people know it's showing up other places as well. Stepping outside of the evangelical box, we can go back in now.
Yep. No, we can step out as much as we need. That's part of the safe place here. Yeah. Okay, so we got a super cool story, even if we don't know exactly what God's doing, but maybe if we put all the stories together, we can come to some conclusions. All right. Now, even after I've said that, though, I want to remind you that I at least don't think, many people probably disagree with me here, but I don't think the Bible speaks univocally, right? So I don't think that we need to take all the different stories and then mash them up and come up with a systematic theology answer for seraphim equals this, right? It's okay with me if seraphim equals something here and equals something else here, and other people understood it something else here. Those are just different traditions at that time. So that's okay. Even in the evangelical box, that's an okay thing. But it's a little scary because we're used to, like, okay, let's get all the verses on this subject, mash them up together, right? We'll look at all the gospels and we'll figure out what this happened, and then we'll make a harmony of the gospel. And now this is what actually happened, the real thing, right? That scares me. I'd rather just let's just say, here's the different traditions. All right, so we've got at least a couple different traditions right now of what seraphs are. Maybe literal snakes, maybe as Tom said, also allegorical. Weird snakes that are going on in the temple of God, singing songs, putting coal, right? Like that's some weird stuff. We're going to get back to that story. I'm using it as a bookend. Okay, but there's other stories too. So let's digress for just a second into sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic. Okay, the Bible is full of magic. Don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. There's some crazy, weird things going on in the Bible that don't make sense outside of magic, incantations, and stuff like that, right? Like Jacob has a super cool stick that makes his sheep grow a whole lot better. You know, these are just some weird stuff going on here, okay? And that's okay. That's the world they lived in. Again, God lets his people tell his story. He's going to say it in the way that they understand things. But sympathetic magic is the idea that you create something to ward off something else. Okay, so this is this nechoshet, right? This bronze nachash, serpent. So they put something up on the serpent, on the stand in order to keep away the snakes. So I think 1 Samuel or 2 Samuel has them doing, maybe it was Kings. I think it's Samuel. They make mice. They make like gold mice or bronze mice to keep away the probably what's Black Plague or something like that at that time, right? The tumors, the sores that come on the people, right? So they come and they bring disease. And so they create these things and that somehow wards them off. The reason I bring that up is because there's something else that is made during this early in the ancient Near East time period. Near East? Yeah, more or less. It's called a uraeus. A-E-U-S. Uraeus. Yeah. You guys know this word? Some people might know it if they like movies like The Mummy or okay, that's pretty much the only one I can think of. I thought I'd have a long list of Egyptian kinds of movies, but I can't come up with any Egyptian movies. So this is actually a Greek word, but it comes out of the old Egyptian kind of idea. Uraeus means to rise up. Okay, so it's the risen up one. Okay, now we're all good Christians, so all of a sudden we're like, whoa, 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 the risen up one, this is going to be great. Okay, but it's not it's not going to be quite so exciting. This is just, you know that snake that they put in Egyptian headdresses? The cobra that comes up? You see it all the time in movies. Maybe you've seen it in a cool book or something like that. So it's the snake that rises up when it's being attacked. It's the cobra, right? Okay, and of course it's going to spit fire at you. Going to keep you away. So some people say that this is a sympathetic magic, right? This is to ward off serpents. Okay. Others would say, no, it's to inhabit almost the power of this risen up one, the snake. Okay. So we don't know exactly what's going on in Egypt. Maybe an Egyptologist can say there's a consensus, 98%, but I'm not an Egyptologist. So I don't know what the consensus is on that. There seems to be some mixed views on that. But it's a fire poison snake. It's a flaming serpent. Okay, that's the idea. So it kind of sticks with the seraph. And Egyptians have a longer history than Hebrews do. So, and they've got a lot of messing around with the Egyptians, right? For good and for bad. Like they were taken captive, but also they lived among them as for a while. So there's a lot of connections they would have. Maybe this might be the beginnings of this mythology. Okay. If you're new here, when I say the word mythology, I don't mean pretend. Okay. I just mean if there's an ancient understanding of something, and usually it's bigger than itself. Right. So I might talk about the myth of the Garden of Eden, but I'm not necessarily saying it didn't happen. Okay, I'm just saying it's a story that's designed to make it bigger. It's bigger than itself. Okay, so you can believe it didn't happen or you can believe it did happen. Myth still is going to work for that category. Okay, so they ward off the underworld serpents or actual real serpents, maybe. Whatever the case, God's using, of course, snakes to kill people, and they are warding it off with that big pole there. Now, what's interesting is that, I mean, have you thought about that story before? You thought about, again, God is not only sending all of these horrible serpents, you know, the rage, his wrath is coming upon them, but now he's saying, all right, if you want to be saved, set up something and it'll save. And then we're all supposed to be like, yay, God. Right? It's still, again, it's just a little bit weird. This just doesn't seem like the God that I know. It seems like he's attacking them. And then he's like, but if you pay up, I'll protect you. It's like a protection racket. It's like the mafia. It's like the mob, right? Like, I'm protecting you from myself. And all you have to do is pay homage. It's like, got it. But remember, this is the way they thought of the gods. The gods were capricious and arbitrary and attacked on a whim or attacked for good reasons and then decided to save you. God is constantly relenting, changing his mind. Like, I started to do this, but then I was like, no, I better not do this. Moses changes his mind. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on in here. Okay, so again, remember, human book. The Bible's a human book. That doesn't mean it's not a divine book. Okay, but what I'm trying to do is show you the humanity of it. I do believe there's a story that is going through this book that is stinking amazing, that's leading to Jesus in a way that I think is so beautiful and awesome. But I also want to just take us as scholars and say, okay, let's look at the humanity of this. Let's look at what they're doing in their time. Okay, in case some of you haven't been here for a while, you don't know me. There's a reason I'm doing all this and why I'm a pastor, right? This whole Jesus thing is really important to me. Okay, but back to this. So there's also stories in Assyria. So Assyria is the country that is northwest, basically, of Israel. It's a very big area. And out of Assyria, we have this great story of Esarhaddon. You may have heard of him if you've done some Hebrew Bible work in the past. Esarhaddon is one of the kings back then, and he is repeatedly stepping on two-headed serpents. It's his thing. Esarhaddon gets to step on two-headed snakes and also yellow snakes with wings. Okay, these are stories that we have in the Assyrian the annals. And then what he does, Esarhaddon does, is he praises his god. Anybody know the Assyrian god, Esarhaddon's god? This is important. You, those of you who have been hanging out with me for a while would at least recognize it, right? Marduk, not Marmaduke. I say this joke every time, but everyone snickers, so I keep going. Like, thank you for giving me the smile there. All right, so Marduk is this god, and he is the one who protects Esarhaddon from when he treads on serpents. Treading on serpents is also a theme in the New Testament, as you might recall. But what's interesting to me is Marduk seems to be nicer than Yahweh. It just always just kind of bothers me. And I want it to bother all of us. Okay, just a little bit. I don't want to mess you up. I don't want to make you run from the Bible or stop believing in God in any way. So if you leave here and you're like, wait, I still have way too many questions, it's okay. We'll either take care of them or we won't, but don't worry. God's still awesome. Jesus is still on the throne, etc. But I've always thought, and Hamori, in her book, she says, we need to popularize, I just thought this was hilarious. We need to popularize WWMD. What would Marduk do? Right? Because Marduk seems better than Yahweh, is what she says in this particular case. All right. Bible nerd humor. And only 3 people are smiling. All right, anyway, let's keep going. Let's look at Deuteronomy 8. Some of you are like, this guy should never be a pastor and certainly never talk about humor. Okay. Deuteronomy 8:15. Let's look at that one real quick. You can stop me anytime with questions or like, I've got cool ideas. I'm starting to make connections. If you want to do that, I'm basically going to go through like 6 more verses or something like that and show you how this shows up. And then we'll kind of bring it all together as much as we can. So this one says, verse 5, Actually, somebody read it. I talked too long. Anybody have Deuteronomy, whatever I said it was, 8:15? All right, Lori. Looks like you got the NLT.
Yes.
Okay.
And verse 5, you will receive this blessing if you are careful to obey all the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you today.
All right. If that's that, I definitely gave you the wrong verse. Is that what everybody else has?
You
No.
said
I got something
15,
different, verse 5.
Who led you through the great and terrible
You
wilderness?
started out saying a different chapter.
I thought it was Deuteronomy 8:15.
Oh,
Yeah, it's who led you
which
through
changed to 15, 5, 8. Okay. Deuteronomy 8:15. Oh, here we go. Do not forget that he led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions, where it was so hot and dry. He gave you water from the rock.
All right. Now I need you to translate the Hebrew for us, Lori. What's the Hebrew there? Come on, somebody can translate it. What do you think? The words venomous snake.
Oh,
I can't
Sarah.
remember what's okay. Seraph is what?
A venomous fiery snake.
That's right. But it's two words here. Again. Nachash. Seraph. Okay. So we have both of those words there. So this is just another one of the places it shows up in. And they translate it as venomous snake, not flaming, right? But venomous. So you see what the translators are doing. Does anybody have something other than venomous there? Does anybody have fiery or flaming or?
Fiery from RSV.
Okay, fiery. RSV has fiery.
Poison.
Mine
So-
says dangerous, but you don't like mine.
That's right. I do not like yours. Yours is not a translation. Yours is just somebody's idea of what they like.
ESV
So,
goes with fiery too.
Fiery, okay, because ESV is using RSV as their jumping point. So, yep, that makes sense. So they're being a little bit more consistent here with the fiery, like they were earlier, but whatever. Like they're making an interpretation, right? And that's part of the fun of this too, getting to see how people decide to interpret it. So you've heard that phrase, right? All translation is interpretation. So your Bible itself is already interpreted as best as they know how, I hope, right? But also with an agenda, right? They want to make sure that you're seeing it the way they see it. So they're interpreting it for you. What I like to try to do is show you that they're doing that, and then you can make up your own mind. All right. So this is a reminder that this passage is of God afflicting his people, and in verse 16, they're gonna, this is the reminder and charge to make sure they follow better in the future. Right? Venomous snakes come, so this is their future plan. Okay, so back to Isaiah. We'll stay in Isaiah for a little bit because seraph shows up a bunch of times. We left Isaiah chapter 6 with the seraphs and the wings and the different things there. And we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 30, verse 6. So everyone turn there if you can. And I'm just give you a little background. This is an oracle. An oracle is just like, a saying. Like these are the sayings, prophetic saying kind of. An oracle about the beasts of the Negev. And Negev just means the south. Okay, so if your translation says Negev, you can just translate it as south. And in it, Isaiah is warning them again. Okay, he does a lot of warning in these passages. If you read Isaiah, it's basically woe to you, woe to you. So this is another warning not to seek military support. Israel, do not go and get military support. In this case, in this chapter, Egypt. Do not go to Egypt and get help. Okay, if you do, then if you're headed to Egypt to give them money, to get support for them, you're going to go through this horrible wilderness that's filled with terrible animals. I basically summarized the whole thing. Somebody read it. Isaiah
I can
30.
read it. I've got the New Living. This message came to me concerning the animals in the Negev. The caravan moves slowly across the terrible desert to Egypt. donkeys weighed down with riches, and camels loaded with treasure, all to pay for Egypt's protection. They traveled through the wilderness, a place of lionesses and lions, a place where vipers and poison snakes live. All this, and Egypt will give you nothing in return.
Okay. So they have to go through the wilderness where, what are the two things that are relevant to us here?
Vipers and poison snakes.
Good job. Vipers and poisonous snakes. Does anybody say anything else there besides vipers and poisonous snakes?
The new
Flying serpent.
RSV says flying serpent. The new
Flying
RSV says
serpent?
flying serpent. Yeah.
Okay, and I heard someone else say something, but I missed it.
Same thing.
Okay, flying serpents. Okay. All right. Mine says adders and darting snakes. Darting snakes. Okay, that's what you got,
Yours is no
Vic.
good.
Okay.
Yours is no good, dude.
Yeah, mine's no good. Yeah, this is the problem with translating stuff. Yeah, so darting. So that first word, adders or vipers, is a word we haven't seen yet. It's just epe. So it's just another word for snake that's hardly ever used. And then darting snakes is, you guessed it. Why do we not have it on here anymore? Seraph. Oh, here it is. Seraph, and another word called meophep. Meophep. I'm not going to write it in Hebrew because none of you care, but it comes from the word oph, which oph means to fly. So it's meophep, seraph. Flying flaming serpents. Okay. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen any flying flaming serpents, but this is definitely counts as a bizarre, weirdo creature in the Bible. Okay, because if we start seeing these things, it does make you think, though, doesn't it? Like, if Nachash is usually the word that we talk about snakes, and we go back to Genesis 3, and we realize that the snake, the curse on the snake is that he has to crawl on his belly. And we always automatically think, yeah, because he made him lose his legs, right? Lizard becomes a snake. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If maybe this creature had wings. Maybe it was a flying, fiery serpent that came and did this stuff. And you're like, well, no, it can't be that because, they're good guys. They're singing holy, holy, holy. Well, maybe it's a good guy gone rogue. Or, I mean, we do have all these other these are attacking God's people. So.
Vietnam has flying lizards.
Oh, cool. All right. They got legs and they got wings?
I don't know about that.
Okay. They fly some.
From friends who were there for obvious reasons, they remember them well, and I can't say on this channel what they call them there.
Okay. That is cool, though. Right? So we're talking about something in the east. So maybe there are creatures over there that they would have seen that had similar things. I don't know. All right, so that's chapter 30. If we go to Isaiah 14, we see the same words, which I'll just read. Rejoice not, O Philistia, all of you. This is 14:29. That the rod that struck you is broken. For from the serpent's root will come forth an adder, and its fruit will be, here's my version, a flying, fiery serpent. So, upario, seraph, meophep. Again, that meophep, that flying, and then the seraph. So this, whatever this thing is, it's creepy. Okay, these flying serpents. Now, maybe they understood it differently. Maybe they're not like flying around with wings. Maybe it meant that they, I don't know, levitated, or who knows, right? We don't live in their world, but we all know what the word fly means. And usually things that fly in the Old Testament, that word oaf, that means they got wings and they fly, right? So this one has wings. And Isaiah 13, just a little bit earlier than that, this is 13:5. So I was reading you 14:29, one chapter early, but the same context, right? calls whatever these flying fiery serpent things are, says they come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath, or the weapons of God's rage to destroy the whole country. So these nations deserve God's punishment. They don't revere God, and the flying seraphs come for Philistia. This is like God's penalty for people's failure to obey. And we see that throughout the Old Testament, right? People don't keep the covenant, then the curses come on them. And the curses might be hail, they might be blight, they might be poisonous, darting, fiery, flaming, flying snakes.
Two things. So God is the blessing, is the one sending these, and he's the cause, and then he's also the cure.
Yeah.
And then also, if the flying snakes are coming after Genesis, then what your point about the punishment for the snake to be on its belly, after the garden, we're still seeing flying snakes. So does that ruin
Yep.
that argument? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it ruins it, but it definitely puts some question into it.
okay.
Yeah. But that would be like saying things.
Hey,
Go
Jay,
ahead. Yeah.
there are some snakes in Southeast Asia that can glide between trees.
Nice.
All right. That's probably what Tom was talking about. Flying serpents, flying lizard things. That's cool. Man, that's cool. Okay. So back, Josh, I do want to say this. Like, we want to be careful if we deal with chronology of the texts.
Yes.
And you know all about how textual criticism works, but so for instance, we're going to see, in Genesis 6, we're going to see the Nephilim, and
Yes.
then we're about to get everybody destroyed. Like all the Nephilim are going to die, but we're going to see the Nephilim over and over again in the Bible,
Right.
the Gibborim. So I think it might just have the concept, the idea, like, okay, this person, in this case, Nephilims are giants, right? Or their offspring are giant. Like, it might just be the idea that anytime they see a giant, they just go, bad guy from Genesis 6, right? You guys remember that? The Nephilim. Or like Craig was saying earlier, right? They're snake. I think that was Craig. They're snakes. This is just, they represent a person. Oh, somebody else. Craig was going against that idea. Yeah. So it is possible that the same theme would keep showing up. Like this particular serpent got his wings taken off, right? Just like if it was the legs, there are still snakes with legs, right? We call them lizards, I guess. So, I mean, they're still there. So maybe the winged snakes exist. Or maybe they don't exist at all. Maybe it's an image.
That was my next question, but I think you're working your way towards that, right?
I am. Yeah, that'll be our question.
Isn't a winged snake a dragon?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason I called this deities, demons, dragons.
Let me get this straight. So you
Go
had
ahead.
said that something about a golden mouse keeping tumors away or something like that.
Yeah.
So every mouse I've ever had in my life has always gotten a tumor. Is it just thinking? I felt like that explained. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if it's
like,
mice.
why do these mice get tumors? But I guess it's an old curse from the Old Testament.
There you go. That's probably why. Yep. Yep. All right. So let's see. You'll also notice that most of these seraphs show up or create some sort of a wilderness inhabitation around them. Did I say inhabitation? Habitation, right? Something around, they inhabit wilderness space. So either they're coming in the wilderness or that place by them coming there becomes a wilderness place. And you remember most of the monsters that we talked about come from the outside. They come into this, or you enter into this domain that is scary. And so this uninhabitable wasteland, like before things are organized, we live in a world of chaos. Again, back to the Genesis story, right? Where there's chaos and then God starts ordering things and putting them in their place. So they all take place in that. So seraphs are always, that's not true. That's unfair to say. They're often consistently connected with wilderness or death, places that are negative. Okay, so now let's go back to the seraphim from Isaiah, right? These heavenly seraphim, try and connect them with the earthly seraphim, right? Are these different? Are they the same? What should we be doing? Right now, you just have a lot of information. You don't know exactly what to do with it. By the way, I don't know what to do with it either. So if you're just hanging out for the next 30 minutes to think I'm going to wrap it all up, no. Well, we're going to talk about it, so it'll be fun. So here's back, remind you where you're at, right? Isaiah first sees this gargantuan God whose robe fills the temple, right? And gods are always seen this. That's not true either, always. They're often seen as very huge. Actually, we have a very cool temple in Syria that they've found where as the temple itself, is here, but there's an entrance to the temple and there are 3-foot footprints that are 30 feet apart from each other, right? They've engraved in the ground to give you the idea that the god is heading towards the temple, right? And they've obviously got a 30-foot stride and 3-foot, which is just kind of cool, right? That's just extra information in case you're ever on Jeopardy or something and they ask you about it. It's a Syrian temple. Okay, so we know that whatever these seraphs are serpentine of some kind. All the other accounts make clear. Isaiah himself makes clear in chapter 30 and chapter 14. This is what we know. Deuteronomy, we know, uses the double nouns, right? The seraph, and the fiery and seraphs together, seraphim snakes. Isaiah seems to just call them the flying seraph. They show up in archaeology all over the place with lots of different wings. We see them not lots of different wings. They show up with lots of different appendages. So some of these serpentine beings have feet, have legs. Some of them have hands. Some of them have 2 wings. Some of them have 4 wings. We don't have any evidence in archaeology of 6 wings like we find in Isaiah, but I mean, would make sense that there might be one, another one somewhere, or that Israel's story might change a little more, like, ooh, you got 4 ones, we'll have 6 wings, right? Like, so that just makes sense that they would do that kind of stuff. There's even not only just stamps and seals and scarabs, the little beetle things, the scarabs with imprints on them. Not only those, but we even have one on the Western Wall in Jerusalem, which is just cool. So a picture of a seraph. Hold on just a second. Something jumped up. Okay. So the seraphim are calling out to one another. The doorposts are shaking like Psalm 29, right? The whole world is shaking. God's breaking cedars. Things are just dying around them. They're crying out, holy, 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 God of armies. That's God of hosts, right? Lord of hosts is the armies God. No hallmark angels here, right? No cherubs, no sweet looking things, whatever the seraphim is, right? That's, God of warriors. That's what he's saying. They're crying out to him. Isaiah says, woe is me, right? Or woe is me. This is the end. I've seen the Lord of armies. It's all done for me. And that would make sense if you've got 6-winged flapping things all around you that are crying out, holy, holy, holy. Then the seraph burns him with the coal and explains that is somehow to cleanse him from sin, which is also weird, but we'll talk about that when we talk about a different creature later on. But the fact that, like, is it Isaiah that needs to be cleansed, or is Isaiah a symbol for Israel? I don't think we're talking about that here, but we'll get to it maybe here or later. Then God asks the divine council. He says, who's going to go for us? The us probably refers to God, the divine council, maybe the seraphim, right? Who's going to go? Who's going to speak for us? And then jump to verse 11. So we're in Isaiah 6, 9 through 11 probably, or something like that. Yeah, somebody read that to me. Because this is weird, because this is where God's going to say you can't repent, Or he's going to try and make it so they can't repent, which is another one of these like, God, I don't understand. And remember, Jesus is going to say the same thing later on. I tell you these parables so that they won't understand. I don't want them to understand and repent. You're like, I thought that was the whole goal, was always to let them understand and repent. But here's where it begins. Somebody read Isaiah, whatever I said, 9 through 11.
And he replied, Go, say to these people, keep listening, but do not understand. Keep looking, but do not perceive. Dull the minds of these people, deafen their ears, and blind their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their minds, turn back and be healed.
Good. All right. So this is like a serious reversal. I don't know if this bothers anybody like it bothers me, but when things bother me, that's when I do extra work on stuff. I just want to I want to tackle it. So interesting though, I try to always bring back past classes, right? The Masoretic text has God working against them, right? To make sure that they do not, that they don't understand, okay? But the Septuagint, remember, Septuagint is later. Well, okay, technically that's not true, just for any scholars among you. Masoretic text is medieval, but it's hearkening back to an older form, okay? Septuagint is Greek. Masoretic text is Hebrew. Okay, the Greek is reading the Masoretic text or reading a more original Vorlage, something earlier, and it says that they hardened their own heart. Okay, Septuagint is going to regularly do this. I'm going to try and bring it out every time it happens. Okay, basically, they, from a few hundred years later, are looking at the text and they're uncomfortable with it. And so they update it. They reimagine it. Okay, now this is not something like, well, evangelicals think this and liberals think, no, this is 100% across the board. This is just the facts, Greek and Hebrew, right? The Greek is a translation and translators have to interpret. So when they translate it, they update it. They make it palatable. So they're going to move it. Like later on, Satan and God are both going to be said that they get David to make a census. In Chronicles, it's going to be God. And in Samuel, it's going to be Satan. Same exact story. You're just like, which one? Well, they were probably uncomfortable with it. So they changed it to Satan, right? The later version. Okay, we don't need to talk about that too much because that probably makes everybody a little bit uncomfortable. But what they're doing is they're updating this text just a little bit because they want them to, they don't want God to harden their hearts. They want themselves, they want the people to harden themselves. Okay, which is just interesting to me. So it keeps going from there. Then I said, for how long, O Lord? Right, you guys are with me? And he said, until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged. Again, the wilderness, waste and desolation belong to the seraphim. Okay, that's where we're headed in all of this. Now, jump back to the bronze serpent idea in your head. I know we're going but I'm hoping the pieces will start coming together. Okay, go back to the bronze serpent idea because it shows up in Isaiah again. Okay, actually in real life, I think somebody brought this up last time. In their world, in the writing of Isaiah, there is a Nechoshet in the temple at that time. Maybe Josh brought that up last time. Right, there is that thing that is there. So that's Nehushtan, the bronze serpent. Okay, and the problem is that people started worshiping this Nehushtan. So they started putting it up and bowing down to it, and that was a major problem. So Isaiah would have known about this. It would have made sense, of course. You know, there's seraphs down here, there's seraphs up here, right? So that because everything's connected. The temple up there is connected to the temple down here. Remember, the temple is the access point. It's how you move from realm to realm. Okay, you enter into heaven through the temple, or maybe through the footstool, which is the Ark of the Covenant, which we'll talk about next time with the cherubim, because the cherubim are, what do they call it, Riston? What did Hamori call it? Like bouncers, like heavenly bouncers or something like that. They're the ones that keep you from going from realm to realm. So anyway, Nehushtan is ultimately getting worshipped. Hezekiah in 2 Kings smashes this idol, and all that I'm trying to get across here is this heavenly, this cosmic projection of projecting earth to heaven, like trying to connect these two realms. So this this is Isaiah representing himself as the people of Israel. This is what I talked about earlier, right? Isaiah is representing himself as the people of Israel. They need to have their lips cleaned because they're entering into the Holy of Holies. So he's smashing this, he's getting rid of it. But unlike the Numbers story, where all the Nachash, the fiery serpents, the Seraph, come in and they look to the serpent and be healed, Isaiah says, you can't do that, right? He's hiding it from them. He will not give them healing. So actually, the updated version from Numbers to Isaiah, God seems to get worse. We thought it was bad that he was just destroying thousands of people. Now, he's not even giving them like something stood up there to heal them. What is God doing? Or, as I like to ask, what is the author of this text trying to make you think about God or about the people at that time? It's less about what God's actually doing. It's what is the author of this text trying to get us to think of?
Could it be an enforcer? Could it be an enforcer for areas or standards of behavior that if you go too far, the enforcers step in and you don't get to go back and forth anymore? Like the ultimate sin.
Yeah.
And if God created it, if God created that system that gets applied in certain instances, then it could be said that he did it, but they could be acting independently based on their created nature to do what God originally intended.
Yeah. I think, okay, Chris.
No, I also think in Calvin in his Institutes uses the verse, and I think it's Paul quotes it in Romans 9. I forget where it's at exactly. It's in Genesis somewhere. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated.
Yeah.
So God's going to do, he hardens Pharaoh's heart. God's going to do what God does. Who are we to comprehend God? We're just worms, like you filthy worms. Like how, like we can't understand. And it says here, it says in Isaiah 6, 9, it says, and he said, go say to these people, keep listening, but do not comprehend. And then in verse 10, it says, make the mind of this people dull. Like, so it seems like God's doing something on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's a good argument for I don't want to say this because I know there's some Southern Baptists in this group, but for predestination, and I'm just playing, guys. I'm just playing. But and I was just having a conversation up on the mountain with the Southern Baptist who his pastor is all about the 5 points of tulip, 5 points of Calvinism. But anyways, it's a good argument for God's sovereignty. Yeah, his yeah, I think that's right.
All right, good. In case somebody starts jumping down that rabbit hole, I'm going to try and keep us away from the Calvinism conversation right now, except to say, by the way, Southern Baptists, a lot of them are Calvinists and a lot of them are not. So there is no rule for Southern Baptists in what direction they're going, but we're not we don't do systematic theology here because I don't like it, basically, and this is my thing. Anyway, so I think it's always unfair to the text. So, okay, so yes, I want to go back to what Tom and what Josh backed up in the beginning of what he was saying. I think this is exactly what's happening. I think what you called them as like border enforcers or people who, had to, not people, whatever these creatures are, had to stop things from going too far in whatever case they are. So if I'm summarizing in the way that after I did this study, I'm just like, okay, what do I see that seems to be somewhat consistent in this, right? So we've got a God of light who's doing wonderful things, but a God of armies also that's coming to some people's rescue, but also destroying others. We got this constellation. A constellation is like an attribute of God, which is unfair, like like something that's directly connected to God, like the seraphim maybe. So they're directly connected to God, and it reinforce the behavioral boundaries, the social norms, as the people who are writing this text understand them, right? So you can only go this far. Like, don't go on to the strange island. There are seraphim there, and they will kill you, right? Don't wander into the wilderness. The seraphim, like, stay in your place, in your ordered place, wherever that is, and we'll figure out a way to give you order, right? Sometimes the seraphim will come, and maybe they'll purify you, right? Don't go, you dumb bears. Don't go in to the spooky old tree, right? There's an alligator down there. He's going to jump up and eat, right? No Berenstein Bears fan. Thank you, Riston. All right. Nobody else is with me. I don't why even try to make, okay. So they're protectors, right? Like, if you do these things, seraphs are going to attack you, and they're trying to protect from something, which I think is going to connect the seraphim to our cherubim that are coming, right? Because these are also boundary protectors. Okay, they have a lot of the same things. They're not angels. Don't ever let me hear you say these are angels. Okay, angels, malachim in the Old Testament, right? They are not. They're something different. They're messengers. Usually, not always, because the Bible's not consistent. It doesn't speak with one voice. Okay, it's giving you a variety of traditions, but these, I think, are some boundary enforcers, even maybe less so than cherubim, but that's the direction that I'm going with these. And if you look at Second Temple stuff, you're going to see First Enoch, the seraphim are the sleepless ones who guard God's glory, who guard the throne of his glory. That's the seraphim. Cherubim do something really similar. Okay, in fact, the cherubim, ophanim, and the seraphim are often combined into one cool, not maybe one, but a group of things that are boundary markers that keep us from things. So, like, if you look at the Ladder of Jacob is another one of those old pseudepigraphical texts. Most people hang out with are Southern Baptists. Okay, yes, yeah, I know. I'm one of them, and you still hang out with me. So, so in the Ladder of Jacob, we start moving. So our angelology, right? Our study of angels, this is systematic theology, starts to shift when we get into the Second Temple. And things start to, they grab hold of these Old Testament concepts and they update them. They put these frames around them. And you'll see Paul doing that, like the thrones and dominions and powers. Like, he'll start categorizing things. And this one will categorize three classes of angels: the ophanim, which are the many-eyed things. They actually just are wheels, but the wheels have spirits. We'll talk about the ophanim. The cherubim, the seraphim, and they're on the fiery throne of glory, the many-eyed ones that I just saw in my dream, holding the four-faced cherubim, bearing also the many-eyed seraphim, right? This is all part of your pseudepigrapha if you read it, right? So these are books that are written probably right around the time or right prior to the New Testament. Okay, they're in that time period. So you might call them the intertestamental books, but we call them Second Temple. So I'm just giving you the cool scholar language. So Moses, remember, he's in the wilderness with all these things. The wilderness is great and terrible. And so is God, is great and terrible. Maybe that's the way I want to end this, for us to have a 10-minute conversation on it. Like, these seraphim are employed by God to attack in order to keep things the way they're supposed to be. Whatever that is in the particular text that we're dealing with, to keep things the way they are. And the reason I bring up the God is also terrifying is I find that connecting the seraphim with God concerns me. And yet they seem to always be connected to him. And I think I'm going to make some sort of an argument throughout this that the seraphim, the cherubim, the ophanim, the Satan, like these are all functionaries of God, right? God uses them the way he wants to use them. By the time you get into the second temple, that changes a little bit. And they become malevolent some of them become arch enemies, like the Satan becomes more of an arch enemy as we might understand him better today. But he wasn't. That wasn't the original plan of the Satan, which we'll get to in like, I don't even know how many weeks, right? The Satan's a long ways out. But this terrible, I had one verse just to throw out here. It says, the God who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, et cetera, et cetera. But the great and terrifying wilderness connected with the flying serpents. And then another verse, you shall not be in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. The same words for great and awesome, great and terrifying, right? But you see how they translate it? Translators are trying to protect you from what's there. Okay, so you either have to go great and awesome wilderness, which is fair, and great and awesome God, or you have to go great and terrifying wilderness, great and terrifying God. And I don't mean that you have to do that. It's perfectly legitimate to say one is awesome and one is terrifying because of the context, perhaps. I just want you to know it's the same word. So you got to wrestle with that. You got to do the same things with that. Okay, so maybe the seraphim's job is to protect God from people who come into his presence. You got to purify Isaiah. Maybe they're getting, heading out into the wrong direction and they've got to wrangle them in. I don't know. Did you come up with any great conclusions from all this Hebrew nonsense? Anything you want to say that was just okay, kind of interesting? I'm a little worried about this.
I'm more confused than I was before.
Yes, success. All right. I mean, yeah, they're fiery serpents. I mean, they're flaming, flying snakes. So that's just weird.
Are they
But you
still
probably
in
didn't-
existence? I want to know if they're still in existence.
Yeah. Okay. So do you mean the earthly things that attack them, venomous, and destroy them? Do you mean those in heaven that
Vietnam.
say holy, holy, holy? Like one is kind of a copy of the other, I guess. That's the idea, that one is copying the other. But the question is, there's certainly venomous snakes. They still exist. You see them all over the place, right? I mean, depending on where you live, you see them all over the place. Okay. The question is, do they protect the wilderness areas? Is that what their idea is? I mean, they do stay off the beaten path, right? And when they come onto the regular path, people get bit. Bad things happen. So you stay out of their habitation. So yeah, those
sometimes they're
definitely-
just like 1 foot off the beaten path. And you have to
Yep.
say, hey, Ellie, don't step on that snake that's gonna bite you.
That's right.
Yeah, my question would be, what are we going to take literal, and what are we supposed to take these snakes literal? And you alluded to that earlier, but like the fallacy of literalism, if we can't take the whole entire Bible literal, then we're in trouble. We've talked about that before in this class many times. But are we supposed? I want to go back to that question what you asked earlier. Are we supposed to take these things literal? Like, are they supposed to seriously really exist, or are they metaphor or allegory?
That's a great question. What do you guys think?
I think God puts boundaries on us, and he made them more defined as the covenants progressed through the eight covenants.
Okay.
Like the Mosaic law was pretty complicated compared to eat this fruit, don't eat that tree, multiply and control the earth. And they didn't do that, so they got thrown out of the garden. And there were 2 of those monsters posted at the entry, so they couldn't go back in.
Right. What are those monsters called? Next week on Tuesday School. Yep. Yep, that's good. Yeah. So again, the boundary ideas. I don't know about 8 covenants, but I hear what you're saying and I'm good with it, more or less.
What if it's
Yes.
the fact that like their culture of their day had this belief that you couldn't be in the presence of God because, God was unique. And so they created all these things to be messengers for God as a way to access God. In our human way of doing, like, we need to have access to God, but we can't have access to God, so we'll have access to all these fiend things that have access to God as intermediaries for us to God, and it's just their way of making that happen.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So, and they do have a ranking, it seems to be in the Old Testament in some way, right? There's like God himself, like Yahweh. There's gods. There's seraphs, cherubs, malachim, all these things under there. And maybe, and there's even, by the way, kings, Moses, which is kind of a king figure, prophets, priests, things that give you access, right? So, and then of course, then there's puny all of us down here, right? And so we have to go through other things to get to God, and some things are to keep us away from God, and some things are to give us access to God. That's an interesting idea, especially if we go to the New Testament mediatorial idea.
Which
Right,
is why
where it
it's
doesn't want to
become
keep us.
less of a thing now. So, like the fans question, are they still around? Kinda, but we don't need them as much as we used to. And so we don't hear about them as much anymore.
And they can't keep us, those who are trying to keep us from God, they're unable to do that, right? Because somebody has come
Yeah,
that's a better
God
mediator
came
and
to
has ripped the curtain, right? So now we have access directly to him. That's that'll preach anyway.
So he's actually growing us into being the intermediaries. That's the
And then
that's the whole purpose of the Great Commission.
right, then we become the intermediaries, right? Exactly.
Yeah, Craig's comment earlier about Jesus becoming the snake on a stake on our behalf.
Yep.
It's beautiful. It culminates there, and then here we are.
Yeah. Yep.
If you say snake on a stake in one more class, I'm adding it to the bingo card. So
Okay.
He's gonna win bingo.
They actually sell those in Taiwan, and if you eat this more powerful snake, it's supposed to give you health and a long life.
Yeah, the rod of Asclepius, I think, is a really interesting concept too. It's if you look at all of our medical facilities, it's there. It's on everything. So if you like, it's amazing. If you like to look at the symbols, and there's a book called "Man and His Symbols" by Carl Jung. It's a really neat book. If you're Carl Jung was one of the godfathers of modern psychoanalysis. But I know we're almost done. But is there anything that we could read, Professor Broadhurst? Like anything you could recommend for next class?
Yes. For next class.
Or before next class, like any like.
Let me see if anybody else has, because I let you three talk a lot. Let me see if anybody else have anything else to say that they want to throw out there. I'll think about your question, Josh, in my head right now. I saw some people with their mics off, like I want to talk, but we didn't give them a chance. Okay, what would you want to read? You won't be able to get the things in my mind before next week. So I can tell you some of the things that I'm using, but I don't know that that's going to be helpful. Let me think about it and give you some more. Like I've mentioned Hamori's book, God's Monsters. I think I've mentioned Vander Torn's Dictionary of Deities. Look, Riston has it up on his hoopla right now. God's Monsters by Hamori, Esther Hamori. Heiser does some stuff, Unseen Realm, Supernatural, stuff like that. My problem with Heiser is that he's a literalist. And he doesn't really give you the choice of trying to determine the question that you were trying to determine, right? Like, are they still around? Were they ever around? Like, they could be just ideas in order to create a story, right? Like, I'm just going to tell you this story this way in order for us to get somewhere. They might not be things in reality. And that's okay. We all do that. Like, that's the reality all over the place. Like, that's how apocalyptic language works, right? That we use images in order to create realities. Like, I could just tell you right now, the sun is not going to be blotted out. All right. I can just tell you that. I know you've studied Revelation in depth and you've done all the word studies and it means blotted out. I know. At this point, you're just going to have to trust me because I can't do it. It's just an image. It's a cataclysmic language image. It's block language that everybody uses for saying it's the end of the world. And it's not even the end of the world. It's just, as Smashing Pumpkins would say, it's the end of the world as you know it. Wait, is that Smashing Pumpkins?
REM.
I don't know. REM, thanks. Okay, dang. Really messed that one up on my 80s trivia. REM is way better. Okay. Anyway, nope, Josh, you don't get to talk. Nice try.
I gotta go. I love you guys. I gotta go to discipleship.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I won't talk next class. That'll be a bingo card. Love you guys. Bye.
Yeah, Josh says that every single week. He's never not talked. And we've never want him to not stop talking, let's be honest. All right. So anyway, Hamori, Vandertorn, Heiser. Yeah, I mean, I can give you some articles, a bunch of like Oxford Press kinds of articles, but just come here. Like, you don't want to read all that stuff. Only Josh does. So let's just hang out, talk about all this stuff. All right. Let's stop the recording because I'm 4 minutes over. And then, Jace, I'm going to have to school you on indie music.